What's up, everyone? Aaron Nagler here for PackersNews.com, live on Facebook after hearing from Mike McCarthy during his season-ending press conference at Lambeau Field. Mike, pretty unrevealing, I would say, but getting his point across in regards to a number of things, whether it's the staff changes both on the offensive and defensive side of the ball, whether it's the search for a new general manager and his involvement in it. Guarded, he said he didn't want to talk in generalities, but he kind of did, which you would have expected all along. But I thought he was passionate about certain points. Most importantly, the job of the head coach in Green Bay to be bringing back championships to that city. He got pretty impassioned talking about how they had fallen below the standard, and the standard was to bring world championships back to Green Bay. Some house, cleaning notes, so to speak. He did mention that there are internal candidates that he is interviewing for the defensive coordinator spot. Our Tom Silverstein reported this morning. Darren Perry, Winston Moss, and additionally Joe Witt will all be interviewing for that spot. Obviously, on the GM search side of things, we reported yesterday. Now it seems to have gotten picked up. Elliot Wolf will be having his interview today. And then obviously a few other people will fall in line internally following that, both today and tomorrow. It does seem like the Packers want to move quickly, both for the coaching search and for the GM search. And there's no timeline in regards to which one has to get done first. At least that's according to what both Mark Murphy and Mike McCarthy have said publicly. And I see a lot of people have joined us, a lot of questions, a lot of interested Packers fans, and that's why I like to jump on here and see what's on your minds. Joy following you with passing. Oh, Milton, that's very nice of you to say. Mike mentioning player acquisition as a priority for building is telling, or a sign he wants the GM who's going to be a little more aggressive. Yes and no. I think player acquisition breaks down into obviously both free agency and the draft. I think it was telling that he said they want to be, or he wants them to be, or he thinks they should be, or will be, primarily a draft and develop program. I thought that was definitely noteworthy. Kurt, please tell me no Russ Ball. Okay, now, if anybody's following me on Twitter, they know I kind of opened a can of worms about that this morning. Look, I understand fans having reticence when it comes to Ball being the general manager, especially in light of the history of the Green Bay Packers since Bob Harlan turned them around by hiring Ron Wolf and putting in place the system that has served them well for the last few decades. But I will also say, we don't know what Russ Ball would be as a general manager. We have assumptions that maybe we can make because of the fact that he's worked with Ted Thompson so closely for a number of years, the fact that he has a cap background rather than a scouting background. These are the things we know, but as far as how he would handle the job and what type of general manager he would be and how he would go about acquiring players, if he would be more aggressive in free agency, if he would be as conservative as Thompson is when it comes to sticking with his own guys, using the draft primarily, etc., we have no clue. We have no idea. We have no track record to go off of. I understand. I understand the reticence, but this outright dismissal of Russ Ball as even a possibility, even to entertain the idea that he could possibly be successful in Green Bay, a place now that he has been for a number of years, and seen what works and what doesn't work, formulating his own ideas and his own plans, undoubtedly, for this moment. I don't understand how people can be so summarily dismissive. Again, I understand wanting to continue down the path that Bob Harlan set all those years ago, but just because they make a switch doesn't automatically doom them to failure. I am more than willing to, if Ball gets the job, to watch it play out and see how he does. But this outright condemnation of even the idea of entertaining that possibility is a mystery to me. When do we re-sign Raji? All right, Mason, thanks a lot. Good night, everyone. No, I'm kidding. Love me a good Raji comment. Fit factor mean internal? TK, that's a very good question. Mike McCarthy did keep coming back to the theme of the need for the new GM to be a fit with the head coach, i.e. Mike McCarthy. I don't necessarily think that means it has to be internal. Obviously, McCarthy has been in the league a long time. He knows a lot of people around the league. And it's not necessarily doesn't necessarily have to be someone he knows. It could be someone from the outside he's never met before or never worked with. But if it fits, if they hit it off, so to speak, that might, that could be a factor. And it sure sounds like McCarthy's a little bit more involved in this search than I would have thought. Mark Murphy made it very clear the other day that the call is his, ultimately. And he did mention working with Jed Hughes from Korn Ferry as far as a consultant on the outside. But Murphy definitely didn't indicate the kind of involvement that I think we heard Mike McCarthy indicate today. So certainly it sounds like McCarthy will be in, if not on the interview process, then definitely on the discussions about the candidates who come through the door. Brett Favre for GM. Nobody wants that. Do you think they will stick with the 3-4 or go back to the 4-3? Steve, it's a very good question. McCarthy was a bit dismissive of it today, saying that they play so much sub-defense in the league now that it's really a matter of the players on the field rather than the scheme. I will say, though, I tend to think, my hunch, and there's no concrete info here, it's just a guesswork on my part. My hunch is that he would like to stick with a 3-4 base, but I don't think, if someone comes through the door who runs a 4-3 and just knocks his socks off, I'm sure that he wouldn't not hire the guy just because he runs a 4-3. Sounds like McCarthy will have some GM responsibilities with Ball being the money man. I guess that's a possibility if Ball ends up being the hire, but I would tend to think the organization was trying to shy away from that, seeing as they've lived through the debacle that was the Mike Sherman era at GM. But you never know. If Ball is GM, is Wolf and Gutekunst gone? Most likely, not automatically, but they've both stuck around for a number of years. They've both been moved up the ladder, so to speak. They've both been given, promotion after promotion. Gutekunst went so far as to withdraw his name from consideration out in San Francisco, and it sure looked like he was the man who was going to get the job. And now, if that's maybe possibly because the owner was angling to hire a coach without his say, and or because he thought he had a good possibility of succeeding Ted Thompson, only he knows. But I have to think that, yes, if Russ Ball gets elevated to GM, then I would think one or maybe even both of those guys would look elsewhere. Why does Green Bay not look outside the organization? Edwin, they are. I know you're reading a lot right now about internal candidates and whether that's the guys on the general manager side or the guys on the GM side. That's only because those are the guys that we've identified already. We've talked to sources. We know what's going on there. But as far as who they've reached out to externally, the only name I've seen floated is by NFL Network, and that's Doug Wally, the ex-general manager for the Bills. But that's the only external name I've seen so far. But that doesn't mean those calls aren't being made. That doesn't mean they're not setting up interviews. We'll have those for you as soon as we dig for them, and we are digging. And as soon as we have them, we'll definitely be putting them out there. But that doesn't mean they're not happening. That doesn't mean those wheels aren't in motion. Right now, the information that we have comes from all the internal people. But trust me, they are casting a wide net, and they are undoubtedly reaching out across the league to find the best guys available. Why won't you be the GM? Because nobody wants that, Tony. They have to interview a minority for GM. Yes, so Doug Wally would fit that description. I wonder if Alonzo Highsmith bolted out of town so as not to be a cursory Rooney Rule GM interview. Always a possibility. Don't believe they are looking outside at all? Well, Dave, that's your right. You're more than welcome to believe what you believe, but I can tell you summarily that is incorrect. McCarthy looks like he's got a lot of input for a coach with only 2 years left on his contract. Well, I think he's got a lot of input because he's the head coach of the Green Bay Packers. As he said, he knows what his responsibilities are. He knows what he is supposed to do in that position. He will be, like he said, he will be consulted and he has input on the general manager search. But ultimately, the general manager is the one who's going to hire and fire the coach. If and when the GM comes aboard and determines that Mike McCarthy is not the man for the job, regardless of time frame, it could be in the summer, it could be after a year, it could be after 2 years. But whatever the case, that man, whoever it ends up being, will have power over Mike McCarthy. So it's undoubtedly an awkward situation with McCarthy already in place, but whoever comes on board will have the ultimate authority on the football side of things. How many picks do we have in this draft? Thomas, that's a good question. I keep saying 11, but I think that's incorrect. We don't really know until we get the compensatory picks, which should come out in about a month when the combine starts. You think he was defending HaHa Clinton-Dix through shots at Randall? I thought he tiptoed around a lot of that. I don't think he threw shots at Randall. I think he's right. I think Demarius Randall should be, worrying about himself and getting himself right and coming back with a clear head and ready to attack 2018. I have little doubt of what he said about HaHa Clinton-Dix being true, being frustrated, wanting to take on a bigger leadership role. I'm not so sure that he defended him as he tried to kind of point out maybe some other aspects. But, it was funny. He said, when Bill Huber asked about effort and HaHa Clinton-Dix's lack of effort in particular in the Detroit game, McCarthy tried to pull back and give a 30,000-foot view answer, then came back to HaHa Clinton-Dix and said, well, I'll need to watch the tape on specific plays. Well, Mike's watched the tape. He knows exactly what plays Bill is talking about, and he knows Bill's right. But Mike, continuing his tradition, as he always does, when talking about his players in public, he is not going to blast them. He's just not going to do it. The one time I can remember him ever saying really anything truly could even begin to approaching negative about a player in public would be when he questioned Eddie Lacy's, commitment and the lack of getting the weight off a couple years ago. But other than that, he has been loath to say anything negative about any of his players. And now that can be frustrating as a member of the media. It can be frustrating as a fan. I understand that. But it's Mike's philosophy. He's what he's done for the last 12 years, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. Did you like how McCarthy handled his press conference? I did. A lot of passion and conviction. Yeah, I thought to use an old phrase, I thought he won that press conference. Not that that means much. I mean, now the work has to get done, and he has to turn things around so they don't have a repeat of this year, regardless of the status of their best player in Aaron Rodgers. But yes, I thought he handled the press conference very well. I thought, the part where he got pretty animated about bringing championships back to Green Bay, I thought that was, I thought that was great. I think that's, great red meat for the base, so to speak. But it doesn't mean much. At the end of the day, he's got to make the changes necessary and get on a path for next season to improve the team and get him back in the playoffs and competing for a Super Bowl. I would rather see Bennett back as running backs coach. Yeah, Nate, I saw a bunch of reports, including Tom Silverstein, saying that he's in consideration for wide receivers. He actually did a very good job as wide receivers coach, and I would tend to think this is Mike McCarthy wanting to get back to what he had there in Bennett from, I think it was 2011 to 2014 that he was wide receivers coach. Bennett did an excellent job in that role. So while I understand because he was a running back, you'd like him at running backs coach, he was an excellent wide receivers coach, and I think that they could do a lot worse. McAdoo coming back, hopefully without the Italian mobster hair. Nice, Scott. It's a possibility. I know Tom reported that last night that both McAdoo and Philbin will be in consideration for the offensive coordinator spot. I think that'll be very interesting to see how it plays out. I know McAdoo actually, obviously has some stink on him after the whole debacle in New York this year. But I tend to think he's still a very good football coach who was in a bad situation, maybe bit off more than he could chew here in New York. But, and Philbin, you look back at that 2011 season when they were 15-1, Philbin helped orchestrate a pretty fantastic offense. And I wouldn't be surprised if McCarthy wanted to go dip back into that well. But that doesn't preclude the chance that they look elsewhere, even internally. Maybe James Campen. He seems to be set to interview a couple of spots around the league and possibly with McCarthy to be the offensive coordinator in Green Bay. So that is definitely something that we'll probably be feeling out and hearing from in the next few days or so. Late here, but thoughts on McCarthy calling out Demarius. Connor, yeah, I did just talk about it. I don't know if he really called him out. He said he's got to worry about himself. I don't think that's outlandish. Think not offering Micah Hyde or Peppers, players with a vet presence, did Thompson in. I think those two were the nail in the coffin. Yeah, I disagree there. I do think, obviously, the Micah Hyde thing, I've talked about it extensively here. I didn't understand it. I get all the points about the safety position and where he's playing, etc. But I just thought as a draft and develop program, you've got a guy you've drafted, developed, playing his best football at the end of his rookie contract. You sign that guy back up. As far as Peppers, I'm pretty sure Peppers wanted to get back to Carolina, wanted to finish up in Carolina where he began. So I can't really put that on Thompson. I think the nail in Thompson's coffin, so to speak, if we're using that nomenclature, I will say I thought it was sticking with Brett Hundley throughout last offseason into this season and having it cost them a shot at the playoffs. They basically broke their playoff streak because their quarterback couldn't play well enough to keep them afloat when Rodgers went out. And that's on Ted Thompson. It's his job to supply the talent, and the talent wasn't up to snuff at the game's most important position. And it's funny, speaking of which, McCarthy kind of alluded to that today in his press conference when he was talking about the quarterback spot and needing 4 strong guys in training camp, which kind of tells you that maybe he doesn't think he had 4 strong guys in either this training camp or the last few training camps. It's a little thing, but to me it's a little bit telling. I think he thought the quarterback spot was not up to snuff this year. Also interesting that he said he didn't think Brett Hundley was prepared well enough for when he did get his shot. Obviously, that speaks to the jettisoning of Alex Van Pelt as quarterback's coach, although McCarthy and the Packers are framing that as Van Pelt being the one who instigated this move and wanted to explore other opportunities. You can't deny what McCarthy just said. Hundley wasn't prepared well enough. Well, that's on the quarterback's coach. Will the new GM get rid of Hundley? Brandon, that's a good question. Really depends on who the GM is, what his philosophy is, what he thinks of Hundley, and he saw on that tape. I tend to think they would stick, whoever it ends up being, would probably keep him around just because he'll be cheap insurance. As far as if he's the number 3, say, they bring in either a veteran guy to compete with him or they draft somebody. The guy knows your playbook, he knows your system. Since McCarthy's sticking around, you can at least get through a game with him in an emergency, and he's dirt cheap. He's on the last year of his rookie deal. So now that doesn't, they could keep him around, say, through the offseason and maybe the start of camp and then end up cutting him. But for now, I don't see any reason to move on until you have other talent at the position that makes it, wise to do so. Hundley will be gone. Tony, that's a possibility. I hope McCarthy has more say in who we keep. Nate, I think he'll have input, but ultimately it will be the GM's decision, whoever that might be. Draft or trade for a backup QB. They could make a trade, Phil. I think they'll look in free agency as well. Ted does not believe in veteran leadership on defense. I don't think you can say that's entirely true. The man went out and signed Charles Woodson and Julius Peppers for just that reason. In addition to the fact that they could play, but I think he understood the importance of it. I think he wasn't going to overpay for it, perhaps. Brett Hundley should be cut. Zach, a lot of Hundley thoughts here in the comments. Chances Mike McCarthy not calling the plays next season? Mike McCarthy indicated to us just a little while ago that he will continue to call the plays regardless of who the offensive coordinator is. I think the partnership with Aaron Rodgers will continue in Green Bay between McCarthy and his quarterback. And look, they've been really successful on the offensive side of the ball for a really long time. I don't see that changing anytime soon. They'll maybe bring in some new blood, have some new things, new tweaks, what have you. But they'll continue down the path they've been on offense, and they'll continue to score a lot of points. Do you think they will sign an NFL all-pro pass rusher or defensive back this year? Oh, well, all-pros don't really become available too often in free agency. I think they will look to address both of those spots, but all-pro might be a bit of a stretch. What if the new GM picks a quarterback in round 1? I am here for it, just for the drama. It'd be amazing. I don't think he will, but that would be incredible. So, why sign an offensive coordinator? Jay, because they do a lot of behind the scenes work in regards to breakdown, tendency work, as far as game planning, going ahead, like say different down and distances, what works best for the personnel, various personnel groupings. It gets broken down to a great deal of minutia involved there. That the head coach doesn't need to deal with. Will Ron Zook take over the Lambeau Leap coaching duties? I don't know, but it sounds like Ron Zook's sticking around as a special teams coordinator. That was the one area where McCarthy seemed to be pleased with his coaching. Can we trade Hundley or cut him? They could do both, Donald, but I highly doubt anybody's trading for him after what he put on tape this year. Got a feeling J.J. Watt may become a trade block option. I tend to doubt that. The Texans did just sign him to a monster contract, so I'd never say never, but, you know. Dan, how's the weather in New York City? It's windy and snowy, and the bomb cyclone is in full effect. Who do you get to coach, A-Rod? Larry, as far as defensive coordinator, I've been saying for a month I would go get Vic Fangio. I think if Fangio comes in, he doesn't have to tweak a whole lot of their kind of base system, but he's a much better play caller, and his scheme, he's done a much better job with his scheme in keeping up with modern NFL offenses. Will they re-sign Janis and Richard Rodgers? Peter, TBD. I would tend to think Janis will be back. I'm not sure about Richard Rodgers, especially with the injury there in the last 2 games. But I think Janis will be back because he undoubtedly will get very little interest on the open market, and he's very valuable to them on special teams. Are they installing a Ted Thompson or DC statue at Lambeau? Not anytime soon, I don't think. Let's see. I'll take 1 or 2 more people. What good will it be to get a defensive coordinator from the inside? Well, Kathy, it all depends on the guy. I know people look at the fact that they're interviewing Darren Perry, Winston Moss, Joe Witt, etc., and saying, well, that's just more of the same, but it really isn't. We have no idea what those guys would do given the chance. It would have been nice to maybe get a look, say, earlier this year, if McCarthy would have fired Capers and given one of those guys a shot on game days, but, you know, absent of that, we don't really know what kind of defensive coordinators they would be. They may be, they may be calling the same type of system, the same type of plays, but, you know, their day-to-day feel, their down-to-down feel, what their game plans would be, how aggressive they would be blitzing-wise, their tendency when it came to pressuring the quarterback or playing coverage, all those things would be different than they would be under Dom Capers. So you can't really say that, you know, okay, just because they coached under Dom for the last X number of years that they would be the exact same as Dom. It's the same thing with Russ Ball and people painting him with the Ted Thompson brush. Yes, he's worked very closely with him for a long time, and yes, he undoubtedly learned some things from him, but that doesn't mean he's going to be the exact same. It doesn't mean it's, you know, Dom 2.0. Witt is a cornerback guru. That's what we need. Jeff, I think he's an excellent coach, and I think he should be given serious consideration for the defensive coordinator spot. We need Richard Rodgers for onside kicks against Seattle. Nice, Alex. Do you think Ted Thompson will hold any influence in his new role? That's a really good question because I've seen a lot of people saying, well, if Russ Ball gets the job, then Ted Thompson's still on staff, and it's just Ted Thompson will still be calling the shots. That's what I've seen a lot of, and I can't begin to express how much I think that's off. I think Ted is going to do, you know, what he does, what he loves to do the most. He's going to sit in a dark room, watching film. He'll write up scouting reports, and that'll be it, essentially. I really think people will maybe occasionally knock on the door and say, hey, Ted, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? But I don't think he's going to be weighing in on who they should draft in the first round or who needs to do what as far as the building of the roster. I think that's all going to be whoever the new GM is, and Ted Thompson is going to be doing the scouting stuff that's ultimately what he loves to do. I really think people are making way more of the idea that Ted Thompson will be behind the curtain pulling strings way, way, way too much. Will the new GM bring in Vic Ketchman? Whew. Well, Vic has never officially left. He's still writing for Packers.com, so the new GM won't need to. Who might you take in free agency for the corner position? All free agency questions, I always say the same thing this time of year. Let's wait and see how the transition and franchise tags play out before we start kind of naming names there. Because, look, anybody you look at right now, any list you look at of the quote-unquote best available is going to be vastly different in a month or two once those tags get applied across the league. Dave, I got bad news for you. Dave's comment is, I hope you're right. Well, man, my podcast is called Nagler's Never Right for a reason. Chats in the off season? Are you on vacation? Oh, Mike, there will be chats. Oh, there will be chats. Nearly, probably every day. Because I just love talking to you guys. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for the time. I'm sorry if I didn't get to your question. They do fly by very fast, but thank you very much. And make sure you're tuning in throughout the week. I will be here whenever news breaks, and you got to think there's definitely more news coming. So thanks a lot for joining me. Check out PackersNews.com for all the latest. We'll have everything in regards to the Packers and the search for the GM, the defensive coordinator, and everything else going on with the coaching staff. It's all at PackersNews.com. Check it out. Thanks a lot, everyone.